Inspiration for Teachers Podcast, bringing you dynamic and inspirational educator interviews. Our fascinating guests share their professional challenges and creative resolutions for success. Discover their workable strategies, ideas, and resources to reach your educational goals. And now your host, Kelly Long.
Welcome to another episode of Inspiration for Teachers. I'm your host, Kelly Long. Our passionate educator on the show today is Manuel. Ash is Head of PE and Sport at Immanuel Primary School in Adelaide, Australia. As a teacher, he's seen firsthand the difficulties teachers face in implementing an effective wellbeing program that is easy to follow and beneficial. This is why he started Growing with Gratitude, a fun, revolutionary approach to building positive habits. Welcome to the show, Ash.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here, and hopefully I'll be able to add some value to your listeners today.
Fantastic. Before we dive into your educational challenge of creating environments of well-being where teachers and children can build positive habits, what I would like you to do is just say hello to our listeners and take a moment to fill in the gaps from the intro.
Yeah, sure, Kelly. So my name's Ashley Manuel. Ash Manuel. I've been a primary school teacher for 11 years in Adelaide, Australia. I recently got a promotion in my job where I've been promoted to the head of PE for the last 3 years now, and that involves a lot more administration, organising sports teams, curriculums, and big events that we have at our school. We have a big sports program, so we have a lot of sports days, swimming carnivals. So prior to that, I was a year 2, 3, 4, and 5 PE teacher at the same school. And so here we are today, and I've sort of gone down a different role over the last 18 months and looking into a lot of wellbeing stuff and how teachers can incorporate positive habits into classroom as well.
So I can't wait to jump on into that with you, Ashley, and give our listeners some really good, valuable research advice and practical tools that they can then implement in their own environments. But the show reaches out around the globe, and we have really enthusiastic educationalists that listen to the show, and they're always super keen to get an immediate takeaway from the show. So what I've been doing with my most recent guests on the show is trying to explore a theme, and that theme is around teaching and learning and getting to the heart of what teaching and learning is. In your opinion, what do you think the most powerful tool or strategy a teacher has in their toolkit to aid learning?
That's a great question, Kelly. I think what it comes back down to is has that relationship with the kids. I think that if you can build that relationship with students, I think that goes a long way, because if you have that strong relationship, you know when it's a good time to have that, I guess, fun and a bit of a joke in the classroom, but then that time for learning where the children need to switch back on and really concentrate on what they're learning. So I think the biggest toolkit or the best toolkit that you can have in your, I guess, teaching bag, if you like, is that relationship that you build with the kids. And I mean, that can take some time. It's not easy to be like that relief teacher for the day and build that relationship, but over time, if you get to know the kids, obviously there's got to be a balance between being their best mate and also being that authority figure in the classroom. But I think if you can just give, I guess, one thing, that relationship that you build with the kids is, I think, the most important thing.
And do you have a quick tip as how you start off on that journey of building that relationship? Because I take it from your background, and I definitely see it at my school with our PE teachers. They automatically have a basis for building a relationship, which is to just talk about sports on a variety of different levels. But do you have a little tip that you could advise our listeners as to what they could do to kind of help foster a better relationship, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely, Kelly. I think the best way to build a relationship with the kids is find out a bit more about them. So I'll give you an example. So particularly on a Monday, I know that a lot of our kids play sport, and I'll ask them, how did you go in your Australian rules football game, or we call it soccer, so soccer game on the weekend, and just talk about them. And you just pick up little things about each child that you know what they do out of school or in school, and talk to them about it. And you can see the kids, like when you ask them about it, that their eyes light up and think, oh, this teacher actually cares, and he knows a bit about me, and he's listened to what I say. And I think that's a great way to go about it. So find out something about the student, and just ask them little questions, and it shows that you certainly take an interest in their lives. So I think that's a great way to go about it.
What you're saying is really enforced as well by some research that John Hattie did on what impacted on student achievement, and he very much said that there were 138 different influences as to what was important. And the really interesting one that sticks out is teacher-student relationships, and that's 11th out of 138 influences. So it's really important, that teacher relationship, and sometimes it does get overlooked, but an interesting theme to explore, just to kind of divert my listeners back to it, is James Studevant's episode where he does talk about relationships and what we can do. So I totally agree with you, Ashley, and thank you so much for just sharing your advice there. But I'm just going to change the pace slightly now and put you in the centre of our educational compass and find out from you right now in probably 60 seconds, but I never seem to stick to it because I get distracted. But what excites you about the teaching profession, and what would you most like to change and why?
Well, what excites me about the teaching profession, Kelly, is that just the resources we have to teach with these days. In PE, you can basically have the kids film their lessons, and then we can package together, and that can be a form of assessment, and they can take home and show their parents. And just the teaching resources that we have these days is certainly exciting me. And that, I think, if we can get that message across, kids can achieve basically, if we actually teach this from a young age, they can achieve whatever they want, because we've got the internet, most of us are lucky to have home and shelter covered. So if we can teach the kids that how lucky we are to have home and shelter, food, and we have the internet, and we can explore so many different things, and that's what's got me really excited about education at the moment. And I think the reason why it fits in with what I want to change in education is that I think if we can actually start teaching kids that if they want to be, for example, a hard thing to get into, but like a doctor, for example, if they fail on their first attempt at getting those correct marks in year 12, but there are opportunities, other ways to get into that course as they go on. And I think sometimes kids, not so much at the primary school age, but if we can teach the kids at that age, and as they go through high school years and everything leading into their final year of school, is that, well, if they do fail, there are other ways. And I think, come back to, childhood depression, teenage depression as well, is I think a lot of kids do put pressure on themselves in that high school years and leading into that year 12, because if they think they don't achieve their score to get into the course they want to, their life's over. But with these days, there's so many opportunities and so many ways to achieve what they want to. If we can teach the children in primary school years that sort of mentality, I think that's going to change the way kids learn and the way they go about it, and they'll understand that there's always another way, and just keep persevering. And I think that's very important.
I think you've hit on something there, because I've definitely experienced that myself, because I teach at secondary level, so 11 to 16. And I distinctly remember being in an exam and going over to a boy, and he had his head down on the desk as soon as they said to them, "You can start the paper." And I went over and I said, "Come on, the exam started, give it a go." And he said, "Why bother, miss? I'm going to fail anyway, so I might as well just not try." So it was easier for him not to put any effort in and fail, as opposed to putting in some effort and failing anyway. And that was his view. And I thought, gosh, that's crushing. That's the way you're going to view all of your life. So building those skills, I think, Ashley, at a really young age, I agree with you. It's so important. And that's what we're just going to dive into now. We're going to go into that educational challenge that you're going to share with us on the show today. But just before we get there, I just want to remind our listeners that they can find all of your resources on our podcast page at inspirationforteachers.com, and they can find everything that we're going to be tweeting out about the show at Inspiration4T. So let's go into that challenge that you're going to explore with us today, Ashley. So please, can you take us on that journey with you and set the scene and the story as to what the problem was that you encountered and why you felt like it needed to be changed and what solutions you discovered?
Yeah, Kelly, this is a bit of a personal story. Going back probably 3 years ago now, I sort of started to look into what it means to be successful. We all hear the word success, and success means different things to different people. So I started looking to how the really wealthy and people built their wealth, and a lot of it comes down to sort of that property side of things and businesses and how they built that success. And what it came down to, a lot of the theme was happiness. Happiness led to their success. And I'm thinking, well, how do you become happy? I mean, we sort of all happy have a laugh, but then the more I looked into it, there's actually ways to actually cultivate happiness. Then I looked further into it, and another thing came up, and that was gratitude leads to happiness, and then happiness leads to success. So I sort of learnt this little, theme that kept coming up, and I got really interested in that. So I started to read a lot of positive psychology books and books on furthering, success. And there are interventions and little activities that you can do to improve your happiness. And so schools may implement activities like this. But when I grew up going to school, I never learned about this positive psychology, and it wasn't probably really around. And Martin Seligman was probably the best known person who founded positive psychology, and it was sort of started in the 90s, and I missed out on that side of positive psychology at school. So I had this idea one day that, I've learned all these activities I've been implementing in my life for about a year, and I thought, I haven't learned these at school. They're very easy to adapt to primary school age kids. I just started to develop a bit of a program to help teachers teach positive habits, and I decided that I'm going to have 3 criteria. I thought, teachers always get stuff added into their curriculum and really get stuff taken away, so it had to be easy for teachers to implement and didn't take up too much of their time. It had to incorporate the home life as well as kids, because I think it's important that what schools teach at school, obviously, and then at home, it's great for that to align, so teachers and families are on the same page. So I had to incorporate home life as well, and it had to be engaging and fun for the kids. And so I just sort of started to think about how I could do this, and it took a fairly long time. It took about 18 months to develop a bit of a fun program for kids, but what it came down to was that I wanted to make sure that kids were learning positive habits of gratitude, kindness, mindfulness, optimism, and also learning about serving others, so helping others and doing things for other people. And so the educational challenges that teachers I found that I spoke to didn't really know how to implement these positive psychology, wellbeing, gratitude. I mean, a lot of schools are now aware of it, and I know there's a lot of wellbeing coordinators at schools now, and there's a big focus on it. So I wanted to make it easy as possible and cover that criteria. So that's the reason why I came up with it, because I found that a lot of teachers had this struggle, and to be very powerful, had to cover that criteria and also be highly engaging. And so basically the gratitude, kindness, mindfulness, optimism and service come under short 2 to 10 minute activities. And the idea is to do them at least every day if possible, but at least 3 or 4 times a week to really build that habit. Because there's so much research out there about, particularly in adults, but also in kids, that these positive habits and gratitude in particular does increase academic success, and it improves relationships in kids. It reduces anxiety and stress and can reduce depression. And I think gratitude is the biggest one, teaching that kids that how lucky they are to have what they have and not to worry about what they don't have.
What I'd be really interested to find out based on what you said was, how do teachers cultivate an environment of happiness and gratitude easily within their classroom?
Yeah, definitely. What I found out, Kelly, is that there's a lot of activities to do that, little activities that you can do to cultivate that. So, for example, just little activities like writing things that you are grateful for. Writing down is very important, I believe, because when you do write it down, I think there's research out there that does, so when you actually do write things down, it sticks with you more rather than just expressing it. Also, other ways is creating a class environment that promotes happiness as well. So you might have posters up on the wall that are quotes about gratitude and happiness and kindness. And another way to do it is that a gratitude tree is where you have this tree with branches and have paper leaves cut out, and write down things that you're grateful for, and then place it on the tree. And that's a visual reminder for kids in the classroom to see that when they look at it, they can see, yes, I am grateful for what we have. And that's just a reminder, because sometimes I think kids get in a bit of a state of sadness, but hopefully that environment in the classroom will really hit home that how lucky they are, and that if they are sad, that might bring them back to that neutral level. I am okay, everything's okay. And that's just a couple of examples. A couple more, I think reflecting on the positives from the day is very important. So at the end of a school day, for example, you might have just a quick discussion or get children in a diary just to write down something that they are grateful for and from that day, and maybe 2 or 3 positive events that happen. and then they go home thinking of the positives from the day. So they're sort of rewiring their mind to think about and focusing on the positives from the day rather than the negatives. I can think of one more, and students actually look out for kind acts that other students do. And what you can do is another activity on a different day is, say at the start of the day, okay, today's activity is the kindness box. So you might have a kindness box in the classroom, and maybe just before lunch or at the end of the day, you might say, okay, we're going to nominate somebody to go into the kindness box, and you'll write just on a piece of paper so an act of kindness that somebody's done that you've witnessed in the class or around the school. And I think if kids know that they're going to, or if other kids are going to be watching out for other kids doing kindness, and that promotes that people trying to do kind things for others, and it's like planting that seed. Like it might not happen straight away, but if you keep sort of doing those activities over and over again, I think over time that builds that habit, and then it's sort of ripple effect. So it leads into other parts of their lives as well. So they're doing kind things in the classroom, then they'll go home and do kind things at home, then in the community. So it's just planting that seed and getting to think. It's not going to have a result overnight, but it's just building up. And I guess the way I like to look at it is planting the seed in primary school, cultivating during high school years, then harvesting when they're adults because they learnt these positive habits at a young age.
So one of the things that you mentioned was about making it habit forming. How do teachers, the people that are going to be building these programs, how do they make it habit forming so that the students are regularly thinking in that mindset?
I think the activities, if you keep them short, they don't have to be 2 or 3 minutes long, but do them regularly every day or 3 or 4 times a week to get children to the habit. I mean, there's stats out there. I've heard of 21 days builds habits, then I've heard of 42, 60 odd, but I think the best definition of how long it takes to build a habit is by Gretchen Rubin, who has written some awesome resources on happiness and is one of the gurus of happiness in the world. And she says it depends on every individual's different, so there's no real time frame that you can nut down to say that, okay, after 21 days you're going to build this habit. Everyone's different, so it's just repeating over time. But to stop that boredom, it's got to be different activities. So if you can come up with a suite of 10 to 15 different activities, that positive habits, and there's a lot of resources out there that you can just get short 2 to 5 minute habits, and then implement it in your classroom over a day, and maybe 1 a day or 2 a day, and little things each day, and you can build it into the normal things that you do as well. So fitness is a positive habit, because a lot of research out there is when exercise causes us to concentrate better and focus a lot more. So you can encourage that positive habit of exercise, then actually talk about to the kids why this is a positive habit as well. So anything that you do in your classroom that's a positive habit, you can actually talk about, and it automatically fits in. So, and you can talk about that as a habit as well. And then you can also encourage kids to do stuff at home. And one thing that I'm big on is teaching kids to serve in the home. And I think that comes back to our principal. He's a very good teacher of service. So he encourages, first of all, kids to serve in the home. So building habits of doing things in the home, like helping out in the kitchen at home, or doing vacuuming, taking out rubbish, just serving in the home, serving your parents. And then his next step is to serve in the school. So doing things around the school, being a part of the school community. Then to take that further, he encourages kids and their families to go out and serve in the community. So it's about building those habits of service and gratitude in different ways. I think it's very important to do it in different ways, so that really creates an engagement rather than just doing the same thing every time. It's about variety.
I had a really interesting conversation with a colleague that was on one of the podcast episodes, and he was talking about pupil premium, so students that are from deprived backgrounds, and he was saying something very similar, that to try and build up their leadership skills, to try and empower them, was to give them more responsibilities. And he was saying putting them into or shadowing people within the schools that have responsibility, so that they are then serving the school, and then they then have a pathway to build up their self-esteem and their confidence, and giving them a pathway so that they can actually see a future. Would you agree with that, Ashley?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't heard of that activity or that exercise before, but that sounds amazing. I guess seeing that model behaviour in practice, that's an awesome habit to get into, and that the child who is shadowing that school leader will have their eyes wide open to about how you can impact others, and that's an awesome way to go about it. Absolutely, 100% agree. That's great.
So thank you for sharing some really powerful messages on the show, because there is a lot of information out there about well-being and mindset and growth mindsets and how we can nurture and create resilient learners. And I think what you're doing is going a long way to doing that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us, Ashley. But we're going to switch up the pace a bit now, and we're going to move on to our inspiration round. And it's an opportunity for us to explore some of your best educational resources so that you can add value or serve in this manner to our listeners that are tuning into the show.
Oh, awesome. Yep, can't wait.
I'd like to shine a light on you and to explore what your proudest educational moment has been.
I think my proudest educational moment has been developing a gratitude program, because early in my teaching career, I was happy. I was very comfortable just rocking up each day and not really extending myself in terms of going out of my way to, I guess, contribute to the education world. I was always happy to just go and teach each day, go home and do my own thing. But in the last couple of years, I felt I've got something to give, and I think creating an educational resource is a proud moment for me, for sure.
Fantastic. And can you share with us the best advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice I've ever received, Kelly, is to never give up. I think that stems back from when I was playing sport, and I think sport is one of the best teachers of basically life that anyone could play, especially children. And that came from sport, never give up. And then I realised growing up, that if you never give up, there's always a way to achieve that you want to achieve. And it's not going to be easy, but as I mentioned before, the age that we live in now lends us opportunity to achieve what we want to achieve, and not giving up, having the attitude to keep pushing and keep trying, will eventually get to where you want to go. So not giving up is the best advice I've received. And
we're so connected nowadays. The opportunities out there are vast. Sometimes I look at my teenagers in my classroom and I think, gosh, I'm so jealous of you. You've got all this amazingness to look forward to. It's just mind-blowing. So can you share with us your personal sources of inspiration?
Kelly, my source of inspiration is a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and I believe this book should be read by every teenager in the world, because it teaches about, I guess this is on my journey of creating habits for myself. This is one of the first books I read, and he talks about doing little things every day that will build up to lead to success over time. So I'll give you, an easy example that he gives in his book is diet. He talks about, well, if you eat a unhealthy hamburger today, it's not going to have any effect. But if you keep doing it every day, over time, it's going to affect your health. But if you eat that salad, and then it's not going to affect your health on that day, but if you do it over time, it will lead to a healthy lifestyle. And that goes with everything in life. In school, study. So if you think, I won't study today, I'll leave that to tomorrow, but then you'll probably leave that to tomorrow. But if you get into the habit of doing a little bit of study here, you might do 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's creating that habit. Then next day you might do 20. You're in that habit of studying, and then it leads on. So build up over time will lead to success. And Jeff Olson's actually done a book for a teenage version. I think it's called Teen Success. And I highly recommend that source to any teenager. And I think that source of inspiration has helped me immensely, especially in the last few years.
Well, we'll definitely be putting that in the show notes page so that everyone can go there and they can find that book. But it's very, very similar to what Vic Goddard was saying in his podcast episode, that they used something that they took from the Olympic cycling team, the GB cycling team, which was marginal gains. And it was just shifting 1% in a positive direction regularly. And it just has this massive compound effect. And I think that's very similar to what you're saying, that just little things often and frequently and over a sustained period of time can make a huge difference, and a really positive difference. But let's just switch on now to an educational habit, and you may have just shared it with us already, Ashley, an educational habit that works for you time and again.
I think positive reflection. I think it's very important particularly for kids to focus on their positives of the day and not worry about those negative things. And I think that the more we can focus on the positives is better for our kids, and getting into that habit of positive reflection after each day, or even if it's a lesson, just thinking, okay, what did I learn from this? Or if you're reading a book, what can I take away from this? And if students are constantly thinking about the positives and how they can apply those positives that they learn into their own lives, I think that's a great habit to get into.
And can you share with us now a resource, it could be internet or otherwise, that you think would add value to our listeners in their daily practice?
Yeah, definitely, Kelly. PE Geek is one for me. That's for the PE teachers. It's an awesome resource. That I like it for the assessment side of things. There's a lot of apps that can assist with assessment, and I guess the PE Geek is a guy who is a PE teacher himself, and he's basically built a lot of apps out of his frustration of not being able to do a lot of stuff, and he's actually built those resources. So that's an awesome one. And for the classroom teacher, I will mention this, but I don't really want to, but I will, is growingwithgratitude.com.au, and that's the resource that I have developed, and I think that's a powerful resource for teachers because it builds positive habits in an easy way. A lot of teachers didn't know how to implement these positive habits into the class, and that's the resource that I've built to try to solve that problem.
Awesome. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. We've learnt so much from you and such a positive message that you're sharing just to help with the well-being of our future learners and the children in our classrooms. So thank you very much from me to you. I really appreciate you joining me.
No worries, Kelly. Had a great time. Thanks for having me.
We're nearly at the end of the show, but before we say goodbye, how can other educators connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. @grow_gratitude on Twitter, and also contact me on email by emmanuel@emmanuelps.sa.edu.au.
Thank you for joining us today on Inspiration for Teachers. For more resources, tips and advice, visit our website, inspirationforteachers.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love to connect with you. Just click like on our Facebook page at facebook.com/inspirationforteachers.